all things New Orleans Saints. This is Who Dat Discussion.
Who dat? Who dat? Who dat? Who dat? Who dat? Say they gon' be them same.
Powered by Overtime Media.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome into another off-season episode of the Who Dat Discussion. As always, I'm your host, Andrew Galata. You could follow me on Twitter at Andrew Galata, and then also you can follow the podcast on Twitter at the Who Dat Dis. And we have a very fun episode in store for you guys today. Jam-packed as always. We're going to get into some Saints news with some signings that they've had, a free agent visit that they had as well. Just looking at the signings, Nick Vannett, Tanoh Kpassagnon, the two guys that they signed, some nice veteran pieces, nice role players that I think the Saints, will add to the team. And Kpassagnon, in particular, I think adds some actually nice, just looking at his projection, like looking at his possibilities with the team. I mean, he's got all of those athletic skill sets. Now you just have to kind of help him take that next step. And with how good the Saints coaching staff is, especially on the defensive line, I think this is a really good fit with Kpassagnon, type of guy, just looking at size-wise that the Saints would go after. So we're definitely going to get into him. Vannett seems like he's going to take over that Josh Hill position. So seems like that was a solid signing as well. And then we'll also, get into TJ Carrie if he's going to come to the Saints. He visited with the Saints, and I think that would be a nice, interesting fit for them. And when you're looking at these veteran guys and like positions that I want to see them fill, you kind of see them filling with different guys than I thought, which, it kind of is what it is, but similar talent. So it's not like it's, to me, I think it's like the same level. It's just I ended up projecting the wrong player. But like for, instead of Kpassagnon, I was thinking of Kpassagnon's former teammate, Alex Okafor, used to be with the Saints. The Saints actually end up with Kpassagnon instead, which actually may be a better fit for them. And he's definitely got, especially at this point in his career, much higher potential. So I actually like that signing a bit better, just looking at those two players. But, you kind of see all of those, role player situations playing out here. The holes are starting to be filled, which is great. And then we'll get into the draft as well in our second segment where, we're able to jump into these first-round prospects. I cannot wait to talk about it. We're basically every episode going to do like first-round prospects, second round, third round, just go through all the Saints picks. So we're definitely, getting into that draft territory, and I'm very, very excited. Saints have a lot of picks. It'll definitely be really, really fun. But I do want to start off here with, I guess, more of a serious topic with Marshon Lattimore, as, the whole thing that went down with him and his legal troubles this week, as Lattimore was arrested in Cleveland on Thursday for allegedly being in possession of a stolen handgun. Police took him into custody for receiving the stolen property and failure to notify, and also 3 other people in the car also got arrested. And then later, Lattimore was charged with receiving stolen property, which is a 4th-degree felony in Ohio, and Lattimore did make bail on last Friday. So, again, we're going to have to see how the legal process plays out, and you can't really comment on anything because right now everything's in a state of flux. We don't know how it's going to end up. So, all I want to caution Saints fans in the Who Dat Nation is just, you got to let and be patient with this legal process and see how it pans out. And, we don't really know how this is going to affect him, his contract, if he would possibly get suspended by the NFL. It definitely puts a lot of question marks on, you're looking at the secondary group that probably didn't need, another question mark when looking at Janoris Jenkins leaving. So now, having 2 voids at the cornerback position would be really tough. But we don't know how this, this situation is going to play out. Again, we'll have to just wait and see. That's really all you can do at this point, and you really can't comment on anything, even with the football side, because then that's just speculation. But you definitely have to at least acknowledge it. That's what I wanted to do here in this little segment here, just kind of talking about, Lattimore real quick. And, he's a guy where, obviously these questions need to be answered, but we don't really know how they'll be answered. And again, when you're looking at, obviously, the 5th-year option, looking at his contract, possible contract extension, it's all into play. And it's really all going to be interesting to see how that plays out and where he ends up. Like, I don't see the Saints signing him until all this legal stuff plays out, which is probably going to happen. Especially for the Saints, the smart move is to just wait a little bit, which I think they will do. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But, we'll see how it all gets cleared up We don't really know how it's going to end up. I mean, according to Lattimore's attorney, he said that it was all like a misunderstanding. So, we'll see what happens. Obviously, Lattimore is from Cleveland, and, he went to Ohio State. He has no prior criminal record or history, and he's cooperating with law enforcement. That's what his attorney said. So, we're going to have to see, and, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, and it's definitely something to look out for, because even if he's suspended for a few games, that's something that, would be tough for the Saints to overcome, depending on who's opposite him. And, it depends, because even if you had a rookie, let's say the Saints first round pick at a star rookie, we'll talk about it a little later, even if they got someone like that, what would where would your confidence be? Not very high. Even if that first game for the rookie is number one corner ready to go, for a playoff team in 2020, it's something that would be very, very, a little tough for the Saints. It would be very tough for that player. Just that mindset would be difficult. But again, I guess Lattimore did in 2017. We're going to see here if the Saints can now do it here. Whoever ends up cornerback opposite Lattimore ends up could be very possible that Lattimore misses a few games at the beginning of the season, due to a suspension. Just looking at like other, Saints players, like you had PJ Williams at the DUI, which is, levels of, crimes is pretty similar to what Lattimore got charged with, just like with the severity. So maybe a 2 to 3 game suspension would be in store. You don't really know yet, because you don't know where Lattimore is going to end up being, if the charges get dropped or if the charges get lowered. Like 2 to 3 games probably is what it's going to end up being, maybe a little more. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how everything happens. And right now you don't have many questions, but I definitely wanted to just talk about it real quick to kind of just acknowledge it, say that, look, I'm obviously waiting like everyone else, and we'll just have to see how that plays out there. Now, moving over to another piece of news here that's kind of smaller, so I just wanted to put it in before we got into the signings, and that was when the Saints met with TJ Carrie. So I believe that happened on Thursday. Nick Underhill, he kind of said it like on Wednesday night, like, TJ Carrie would be a good guy, and like the next day it came out that Carrie was meeting with the Saints. And Carrie's actually a really interesting player, as, he obviously doesn't have the name recognition that Richard Sherman has or Josh Norman has, but he does have, to me, a pretty solid career. He do a lot of different things, play on the outside, play on the inside, play safety. Just looking at the PFF grades, some really solid PFF grades. I mean, last season, 68, which is, for cornerbacks, really solid. Really good run defender as well. In 2018, he had a 67. In 2019, he played more of the slot, which, if he was with the Saints, probably won't be asked to do that. And, he had a 56, and that was one of the lowers of his career, but it's because he played in the slot. He, to me, excels more on the outside where, you see the 68, 67, 75 PFF grades, like all that stuff is really good for him. And, you look at the passer rating against, and those are also really high as well, or really low, as well. You have 80 last year, which is pretty solid. You have 78 back in 2018. Pretty solid there. I mean, his career passing rating, against was 92.3. So pretty solid average player, but that's an average starter player. And if you can parlay that with a guy like, a first round pick, whoever it ends up being, I really think that this group could be really solid in 2021, maybe even better than 2020. And that group was great. Like, that group was really good. It'd be hard to exceed it, but I think it's possible if you can parlay it the correct way. I think the Saints can here, and, looking at Carrie, he's a guy that last year also 57% catch percentage, like that's pretty low. And like overall, I think he's a really serviceable player. He's a veteran. He's played on a lot of different teams. He was good with the Colts last year, and maybe like before that, he's playing for a team like the Browns or the Raiders. Obviously, not playing around with the best players. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. So maybe playing with a better defense, played with one with the Colts, takes his play up a little bit. Like, I definitely think that's a possibility. He won't be asked to do too much with the Saints. I would actually really like this signing. And, you're looking at his prospects. I actually do like what the Saints can do with him. And he obviously would be an upgrade over, what they have now. He's to me, an upgrade over Patrick Robinson. I don't know how big, but he's an upgrade over Patrick Robinson. And again, he's a player that I would like to see bring in. Richard Sherman's still number one. Probably Josh Norman and Carrie are tied for number two. That's just kind of how I am with these free agents. But if you bring in a guy like, to me, Norman, or a guy like Carrie, it kind of parlays you with that opportunity to add a rookie. It does with Sherman too, but I think with Sherman, that puts your needs, like you're going to pick someone that you really have a need, with the first round pick, probably at that point be like a linebacker or something. So, if you add Carrie, the need is still there, but if the player doesn't fall to you, then you just go with another position. But, if the player does and you can get a great stud at 28 at cornerback, great. And that's how I see all of this playing out here for the Saints. And, when you look at between the draft and free agency, I think that would be a nice little signing there. And I do think that it would work out for the Saints. So I'm actually pretty, optimistic about Carrie. I mean, I was looking at his stats. Like, I didn't really know a lot about him before, but I looked at him and he was actually pretty solid. So I was happy about that. And then we're going to get into the signings now. No more speculation. We're getting to actual signings. And we'll start off with the most recent one here, as the Saints did sign Tanoh Kpassagnon here, as he's a guy that is extremely interesting. Just looking at it, he is former second round pick, and he's 6'7", 289. This is a big man, and he has a ton of athleticism. He has all the physical tools, and now he just kind of has to bring it all together. In his first 4 years, couldn't really. And, when you're looking at this, you go back to 2019, he had 11 QB hits and 4 sacks. Like, that was his best year, which would be really solid. But the Saints could get something similar to that, like 5 sacks. And then, you look last year, not as much. He started 15 games, but only had 1 sack. Did have 3 pass defenses. Had 2 tackles for loss. And, when you're looking at his PFF type stats, they're just average, when looking at it. They're kind of, they're better than what Alex Okafor was putting up with the Chiefs. So maybe when you're looking at passing, he's a guy that maybe takes that next step with the Saints. And just like Okafor did, which, kind of makes sense. He did have 70 total pressures in the last 2 years, which is actually a pretty good remark. So that, to me, that is good. I mean, looking at the hurries, pretty high. The sack level, kind of is what it is here. I mean, PFF credited him with 6 sacks in 2019, but Pro Football Reference with 4. So, maybe you split the difference to say at 5 sacks, but, a still pretty solid year. He's a guy that, to me, he's more of a developmental piece. He's still young, but he could also add you good depth. And, with Davenport, you're hoping that one of the two kind of pop off a little bit. And I do think that, this is another kind of hedge your bet signing where you bring in him and then maybe you bring in a rookie and then you call it a day. Like, I could definitely see the Saints doing that. You hedge your bets at every position and you're looking pretty solid in a playoff team going into 2021. But again, I did think this was a pretty solid signing. And you just look at his physical abilities, it's all there. He's got to put it all together. I mean, when you're looking at him running a 4.8 and he's 6'7", 290, like, that's pretty solid. And, he's a guy that kind of has to now just bring it all together. And we'll see if he can do it with the Saints. When you look at the coaching, you're like, he probably could. And, Kpassagnon talked about how he had a pretty enticing deal to go back with the Chiefs, but actually ended up going to the Saints because he was able to, work with a guy like Ryan Nielsen, who we talked about how, this coaching staff could bring the best out of players. And he mentioned Trey Hendrickson, which the Saints did that with. So Kpassagnon is a guy that I do see kind of moving into that Alex Okafor type role. And I think he could do it. He's pretty good against the run as well. Like, he could play both. And, he did start for the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. And, the year before he started 8 games for the team that did win the Super Bowl. So he was one of their role players to starters on a team that was Super Bowl caliber. So he could obviously do that for the Saints. I think it's, only going to go up for him from here, because I do think that with the Saints coaching staff, he is going to help that out a lot. So very interesting signing, and it'll be interesting to see what the Saints do. But, you see these glimpses from him. You see that he can possibly, be a nice piece for the Saints, and him choosing the Saints over the team he already knew with the Chiefs. Not like the Chiefs didn't want him. The Chiefs did want him, but he ended up choosing the Saints. That does show you something. And, especially with a team like the Chiefs, which they know what they're doing, it does have to show you something when looking at that signing. So quality signing for the Saints, definitely something that I am excited about. And, we'll see how it plays out in training camp and, the regular season. It'll definitely be interesting between him, Davenport, maybe they bring in someone else. It'll definitely, Carl Granderson as well. I mean, just having that depth there will be very important. And Cameron Jordan getting back to that 10-sack level, that double-digit sack, that number one guy is going to be very pivotal. Because last year, you did have Trey Hendrickson taking kind of that 13.5 sacks. Like, you're getting that output there, and then Cam kind of, took the more point guard assister role. Cam's going to have to go back up into that main guy role, and I actually think he will. So again, I do think that the Saints on the outside, especially with this signing, the interior is looking a bit thin, so maybe you want to add there. But I mean, with this signing, I do think the Saints will probably be fine. Maybe I add one more guy there, but to me, it's this is a pretty good group as it is here with Kpassagnon. And then finally, with the Saints signing tight end Nick Vannett. Vannett's a guy, again, kind of on the younger side, definitely younger than Josh Hill, just like Kpassagnon. Maybe younger than a guy like Alex Okafor, who I was kind of hoping that the Saints would sign. But, when you're looking at Vannett, obviously a blocker. Just looking at last year, only had 14 catches for 95 yards. In 2018, that was his best year, 29 catches, 269 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also had 17 first downs. So he's a sure-handed guy, too. Like, he's going to catch the ball if it's thrown to him, which is, he's not going to do anything outstanding, but, if it hits his gloves, he's going to catch it. So that's really good. Could, catch the ball in traffic. He does want to take the next step. He said that in his interview with the Saints media, his introductory press conference, there. He did say that he wants to take the next step as a passer as well, and he feel like he has more potential there than he's shown on the field. So that's something that's actually pretty interesting. I mean, looking at PFF 57.2, which isn't awful, when you compare it to a guy like Josh Hill, kind of right around there. Hill, I mean, maybe he's a little bit better, but, also, I mean, Vannett has never played with the Saints, and the Saints obviously have a nice role for those Josh Hill type guys. He's also a good run blocker as well. He's motivated. He can get out and block. Like, that's not an issue. He can do the dirty work. I believe his nickname was like Little Gronk or something in college. He played for Ohio State, so the Saints get that quota checked off their list. They always get guys from Ohio State, so I found that funny. But solid signing. He's their number 2 guy, and now it allows Adam Troutman to do a little more things. Maybe doesn't have to do as much as the dirty work when you have a guy like Vannett, but still look for another guy the Saints could sign. I mean, you definitely would be more comfortable with a third guy, but if you're going in with Troutman, Vannett, and then a guy like Eric Griffin, it would be an average group. You're obviously asking Troutman to step up. I would like to add one more guy, but if you don't, you don't. I mean, you'll see who's available either in the draft or maybe later in free agency where you can pick up some guys. Maybe a guy like Trey Burton you could pick up, for a little less money. And, and that's your 3. Like, that would be a really solid 3 because you have, like, Vannett more the blocker. You have Troutman, who's your number 1, and then you have Burton, who can do a little of both. So it would definitely be really interesting there, and that's definitely a solid signing for the Saints. We'll see. Maybe, he's going to take the next step as a pass catcher as well. I mean, we're just going to have to see, but right now he kind of goes into that Josh Hill role, which, look, you need. It's an unsung role, so we'll see if he can exceed there. I actually think he will. But before we move over to our draft segment and we'll talk about all these first-round prospects that the Saints could sign, I did like a mock draft simulator, and then I just paused it when the Saints were up and saw who was there, and then we'll break down some prospects that I liked that were available, and I'll tell you which one I would have drafted. So that will be a very interesting conversation, so definitely can't wait to get into that. But first, we are going to take a quick break. You are listening to the Who Dat Discussion podcast. Welcome back into the Who Dat Discussion. And now we're going to get into our next segment where we're going to break down here the first round of the draft where the Saints pick at 28 and look at some prospects that when I did a mock draft simulator, these players were available. So it would definitely be really fun to kind of look into these prospects. And at the end, I'll obviously show you guys who I'd pick. But, we're just going to jump right into it here. I want to show you guys the whole board. I should probably, on YouTube, I should be able to insert this picture in. So I'll show you guys who was available here. And, I'll just name up some names, if you're listening on the podcast. So, number 1, this was the Draft Network's mock draft simulator. So shout out to them for having this available so we can all obviously have some fun with our mock draft. So, number 1 here was Devontae Williams, who's a running back from North Carolina. Number 2, was Jason Owe, who was an edge rusher. He was the guy that ran like a 4.3, but had 0 sacks in 2020. So, I mean, that's, I feel like that would be like a Saints type guy, but he's not one of my top picks. Then you have Greg Newsome, the second. He's a guy from Northwestern I actually really like, as well as Caleb Farley, another guy who we'll get into I really like. You have Christian Barmore, who's more of that interior. I mean, if he's available, I could see the Saints getting him. He's from Alabama, did a lot of great things, kind of that 3-tech type. and obviously can learn with David Onyemata. I mean, he's a dominant player, so if they can get him, he didn't play like regularly, like he was more, he played like a little, less than 100% of the snaps. So he's more of like, I mean, I don't want to say role guy because he was a big part of their team, but he didn't play 100% of their snaps. He came in, situationally, but still played a lot. I mean, he's going to be a first round pick, but I don't think he's going to go like the highest because of he didn't play every snap. But when he's on the field, he was dominant at Alabama. So he's a very interesting prospect. Then also Zaven Collins, he's a guy that's just a great linebacker. He's also right in that Saints weight limit that that weight just when you're looking at that with height, it's right where the Saints is their wheelhouse where they like to pick guys. And he's explosive, he's fast. He's one of your best linebacking prospects to me, top 2. And when you have guys like that, it's tough, or maybe top 3, excuse me. It's tough to pass on them. And when you need a linebacker and a young guy come in here, that's a really enticing pick. I think Kadarius Toney was still there as well, which I thought was interesting with all that short area quickness, he has coming out of Florida. So those are the guys that were available. And I'm just going to go to a few guys I like, starting off with Greg Newsome. And obviously, you got to start off here with the cornerbacks. As these guys, you start off with Newsome, but also Caleb Farley, which we'll get into as well. I mean, Newsome is a guy coming from Northwestern who was just shut down for their team. And, that's the guy you love to have. This year, I think he played, 6 games, and, he gave up nothing. And, he's a guy that has very fluid hips. He plays both man and zone. He has kind of all of these intangibles you would like, as a cornerback and a guy that can play opposite Marshon Lattimore. That's obviously some great stuff. I mean, he's a guy that has a good feel for coverage too, which I think is important to see what the Saints do. They play a lot of cover 3, I know, but they do a lot of different things. So being able to play everywhere is a lot. It's really important for the Saints. He can play, bump and run. He can play zone. People are saying speed is a concern, but again, I feel like the Saints, a lot of their cornerback speed's concern. I mean, I honestly really like him. I mean, you like that he's good at reading plays, good at diagnosing, good at being instinctive, getting his, with the, getting his head turned around, doing all of the fundies correctly is very, very important. Has nice ball skills as well. That's obviously really good. I mean, 6 foot, nice frame for him. He's a guy that I like a lot. So, I mean, he's just one of the cornerbacks. I mean, to me, he's more the safer guy because we're going to talk about Caleb Farley right now. And Caleb Farley, he's a guy that I think is a boomer bust type player because of his injury history, but if his injuries aren't a problem, he's going to be a heck of a talent on the NFL level, and he's going to be a complete steal. He's going to be one of the best corners here out of this draft if the injuries do not bite him, because, he had the non-contact ACL injury in 2017. He missed a few games in 2019 due to back spasms and then had back surgery in, just now in 2020. He's supposed to be back full for the season, and I bet he is, but back injuries are something that are very difficult. But he is just, when you're looking at these draft prospects, he's, the guy that does everything really well. I mean, he can play either press or man, and then also zone as well. Press, man, and zone, there. But, has more experience playing press, which I think for the Saints is big because they play all that cover 3 and a lot of man coverage. So having that ability to play, that man coverage and have all those physical abilities, just like Marshon Lattimore does, has the quickness, has the fluidity, has the great athleticism, has, good man coverage skills as, he makes plays on the ball. He gets his head turned around, does all that stuff as well. He's able to be instinctive, especially in zone coverage as well. He does a lot of different really great things. He's fluid. I mean, to me, you're looking at him and J.C. Horn kind of as the top guys right now. And again, he's kind of take that back seat, and he's fell to the Saints. You'd be like, why is this guy falling to the Saints? He seems like a perfect prospect because of the injuries. The back injuries, that's something that you have to talk about. And a lot of teams are just not going to pick him because of that. And, I just think that, his talent is just so good, and sometimes you got to bet on just talent and it working out. I just think Fairley could be one of those guys, and yes, the back injuries are concerning, but it's all there. He has all the talent there, and you pair him with Marshon Lattimore and then with Chris Richard. I really like what he's able to do. Then moving over to Zaven Collins, another guy that, coming out of Tulsa, does a lot of great things from his position. He's going to be a starting linebacker in this league. He can rush the passer. He can play against the run downhill. He can drop into coverage. He can do all of that really good stuff. I mean, looking at him, he's 6'4", 260. When I was talking about the Saints, love those big, bulky linebackers, which, again, I don't really like that much, but they do. So they could definitely pick a Zaven Collins if he's available. But the good thing about Zaven Collins is he's still fast. He's still, he makes plays. He jumps off the screen still, even though he's, a bigger player. He's just, first round type linebacker where you're going to get some really good players. And he's a guy that if he falls to the Saints, you have to talk about him. He did play quarterback in high school, so he understands the game, which I think is really important as well. He brings the speed, he brings the length, the power, the football intelligence. He brings everything. It is very interesting for him, and he's a guy that I'd like to see. I mean, again, it'll be interesting because obviously the speed isn't as high as it is for like those top, maybe smaller guys, but for his size, I think the speed is good enough, and he could rush the passer. Just so many different things. Zaven Collins is definitely one of those players that I would love to see in a Saints uniform. And then finally, have to talk about our last player on here, and that's Kadarius Toney, who, if the Saints are looking for a wide receiver and he's available, it's hard not to pick him. It really would be hard not to pick him if you're looking for a receiver. Just for me, receiver probably doesn't fall at that number one need right now, so maybe you move away from him, but he is a great route runner, has all that great short area quickness, and guess who was the last guy that had that? That was Justin Jefferson. Kind of reminds me of him a little bit. Plays in the slot, play on the outside as well, though. And, looking at his college career, he had 70 catches, 984 yards, 10 touchdowns at Florida last year. Was a very good target for what they were doing down there, and for Kyle Trask. And I do think that he's a guy, you're looking at him, he gets open. Flat out gets open. And I think with a new quarterback, you want guys that can just flat out get open. I do think Kadarius Toney could do that. Yeah, when it comes to right now, I mean, it depends who's on the board. Just because all these guys are on the board, I don't know if I go Toney, but just because the needs you have right now, like if you're able to pick up a linebacker and pick up TJ Carrie, I'd probably go, yeah, let's get Kadarius Toney because he may be the best player out of all these guys. But right now, the way that the roster is falling, I do think they have other needs. But he's such a great player that if he's available and the Saints pick him, I'm not being mad because he's just such a talented player. But I mean, a lot of these guys are talented. We're talking about Caleb Farley, we're talking about Zaven Collins. It'll be very, very interesting to see how that all plays out. And getting down to now who we going to pick. I mean, that's now what everyone wants to hear. I'll say right now, I'm between Caleb Farley just because, he has all the intangibles. It's the injuries that worry you and, where the Saints are looking, that could, be a problem. But, I mean, the depth that the Saints have at cornerback is really nothing, and he's just such a good prospect. If the injuries aren't an issue, he's going to be a slam dunk player, and he's going to be a good starter for this team. Zaven Collins, he's the other guy I'd go out and pick, because you need a linebacker really badly opposite Demario Davis. Demario's not getting any younger, and I think Collins is that guy that has the nice blend of athleticism and, the physical traits being, kind of in that Saints build where he's 6'4", 260, and just obviously, a really big player, but also has the skills to be in coverage and play downhill and rush the passer and all that stuff. He can do everything. That's something that I like as well. Obviously, the speed's not top of the line, which could be a worry, but he's a guy that, especially because the Saints play a lot of multiple, type of defenses. They do a lot of different things, and they use a lot of players that can do different things, just like Collins could do. You look at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You guys know the list is very long to the players the Saints use in multiple positions and multiple ways. Collins could do something similar to that, and he doesn't have the injury history, which again kind of makes me want to pick him. Even though I do want a cornerback, I'll go Collins and then hope that another cornerback like an Asante Samuel Jr. is on the board in the second round, but we'll have to get there. I'll definitely let you guys know in the next episode to see who we'll pick. But Zaven Collins, he's my guy. Pick him with pick 28. I think he's going to go in there, slot with Demario Davis really nicely, grow into your number one corner or number one linebacker right now, and that's what I would do for this mock. Now, maybe in another mock he's on the board, then you look for Caleb Farley if he's on the board. The other guys I talked about are really great prospects too, and I'd love to have him on the Saints. Definitely let me know what you guys think. Do you think Collins is the right pick?
Do you think someone else, do you think that a guy like Caleb Farley will fall to the Saints? Kadarius Toney fall to the Saints? Will, all these guys, I feel like this was a pretty good mock because we had a lot of different guys fall. Newsome as well, Newsome the second as well. So, again, a lot of different guys. So, should definitely be really fun. And then also, Barrymore, we didn't get to talk about, but he's another guy. Like, I'd love to see him, especially with the Saints' lack of depth at the defensive line position. But right now, I wanted that starter at linebacker, so I went with Zaven Collins. But I think with all that said, it is time to wrap up this podcast. If you like what we're doing here at the Who Dat Discussion, you should definitely follow us on all of our social media platforms. That means on Twitter, you can follow us at the Who Dat Dis. On Instagram, you can follow us at Who Dat Discussion. And then also you could subscribe, to the YouTube page. And then also on iTunes, Spotify, all those fun stuff. We are on there. Definitely leave a comment, do all that fun stuff. Who do you guys pick? I mean, do you guys like the signings as well? Just whatever your opinions are on the Saints, I want to hear from the Who Dat Nation. So definitely leave those comments, leave those questions, and all that fun stuff. But I think with all that said, I want to say thank you guys for listening. Turn it loose and Who Dat.